It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
You can tell how important somebody is by the length of their bio. The bio of the person I'm about to speak to is clear, concise, and short. Julie Inman Grant is Australia's e-safety commissioner. Full stop, end of story. That's all we need to know. And the reason that I'm sharing that with you is because of all the people in this country who have their finger on what's going on with tech and our kids. It is Julie Inman Grant. We've known each other for years. We've had wonderful conversations on the podcast previously. And after yesterday's discussion, talking with a young man who was caught up in a honey trap online, who was approached by somebody he thought was a gorgeous girl, who sent him a bunch of images that made him feel quite excited and then coerced him into sending an image of himself to her. Of course, that young girl then revealed herself to not be a young girl at all, but somebody with impure motives, some unhelpful intent. And all of a sudden we've got a scenario where there's a young man who has been completely caught online in a sextortion situation. Well, Julie Inman Grant knows all about that and a whole lot more. She joins me today on the Happy Families podcast to talk about what is going on with our technology companies and how kids are getting caught up in this. Julie, thank you so much for being here. Really grateful to have you.
Thank you so much for not reading my full bio. That would have made me feel old.
You know what? I just love what you've done. But for today's purposes, all that matters is that you know what you're talking about in this particular area, perhaps more than anyone else in the country. Julie, can you provide an overview of the prevalence and the scope of online sextortion targeting teenagers in Australia and how this has been evolving over the last few years?
Well, unfortunately, sexual extortion is not a new online harm. In fact, we started putting advisory outs around sextortion or sexual extortion back in 2018. But it's certainly something that regulators, law enforcement, and governments globally are struggling to address. And it seems to be gathering pace. And the primary reason is this is being backed by organized criminals in the Philippines, in India, in Africa. Remember when we used to get all of those social engineering scams about the kidnapped princess or winning the lottery that you haven't won? They have figured out that this is an incredibly lucrative scheme that works relatively quickly. They've got a well-worn playbook that I'll walk you through. But they're able to blackmail and extort young people who are cornered and very distressed in very aggressive ways. We've had some people come to us after paying thousands of dollars. So we'll talk through what this looks like. But in the past financial year, we've had more than 6,000 reports of sexual extortion to our image-based abuse scheme. And most of these reports are from young men between the ages of 18 and 24. And that's significant because we tend to think about the 18 to 24 age range as, you know, they're adults now. But these are still young men without fully developed frontal cortexes. They may be going in transition, say leaving high school, either going into uni or into trades or whatever they're doing, but they don't have that same kind of pastoral support. And often young men of this age will go to their local police and they can't get help because they are adults. Obviously, police will react more quickly when they're under 18 and it's considered a form of child sexual exploitation. So it's a really vulnerable age. And this is where I think parents and carers and even brothers and sisters and other forms of peers, we need to be there to be backing our young men in and supporting them.
Two things about yesterday's conversation that tie in with what you've just said. We were talking about somebody who was under 18, a young man. He was 15 when his incident occurred. Wonderfully, he was confident enough to go to his mum and say, I'm in trouble, which I think is just the ultimate outcome, right? If something bad is going to happen like this, the fact that mum has a relationship with her son where he's willing to go and have that conversation matters so much. And I want to tread really carefully here. My sense is that when it comes to reporting to police, this is a bit of a lottery. They went to the police and the police almost thought that it was funny that this kid got duped by some gorgeous girl online that actually wasn't who she said that she was. They didn't get anywhere at all with the police. They had a terrible experience there. Now, obviously, this is one of those things where sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But the e-safety commissioner exists precisely because people need help in this area, right? And when you say 6,000 in a year, I'm terrible at maths, but my guess is that's more than 100 a week are getting sprung, getting caught, getting duped in this way.
Well, and listen, we have a really a minimal role here. This is largely a law enforcement issue because we're talking about organized crime. Our primary role, in terms of our regulatory schemes is to be able to take down intimate imagery after it's been posted, but we can also tackle threats to post imagery. But often there isn't an Australian connection or it's happening overseas. And this is why there's very little police can ultimately do. So really what we've been doing is providing almost a form of guidance and support. And we've got a contractual relationship with Kids Helpline and some of the other mental health support services, which often people need. But this is where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so I do want to go back to the important conversations. And, people used to laugh at me when I would say things like, model good behavior for your kids when you're taking their picture, ask for consent, ask if it's okay if you put this on Facebook, because if you ask those questions, then maybe they will have the same courtesy for others. But the other important thing is, certainly COVID has reinforced this. Technology is inextricably tied to every aspect of their lives. And when we're at the dinner table and we're asking them about how was their day at school, how was their sport, what's happening with their friends, we have to start asking them about what's happening online to them too, because this is how they're communicating, they're engaging, they're playing games. They may not have access to their phones at school, but they're certainly using them as a primary communications mechanism.
Julie Inman Grant joins me today on the Happy Families podcast to talk about the prevalence and the scope of online sextortion targeting teenagers in Australia and how this has been evolving over the last few years.
We can go through the key messages that we want to get across to parents and carers and young people themselves. But I'm happy to talk through first how this tends to play out online, that well-worn offender playbook, if you will.
Let's go there. You mentioned that there's a playbook that organized crime, literally call centers that are set up internationally with people showing up to work so that they can exploit our kids. This is so heinous. The mendacity of this is just extraordinary. What are the common tactics? What's in the playbook? What are the perpetrators doing so that they can exploit our teenagers and coerce them into sharing these explicit images and videos? And do the tactics change depending on whether they're targeting a girl or a boy?
Well, I think what they figured out, it's almost 90% of what we're seeing are targeting young men. And I think what they figured out is and they're very good at profiling their targets. John Rouse, who was formerly with Task Force Argos, ran a test a couple of years ago. The followers of Paige Spirawak, who's the beautiful blonde American golfer. If you're following her, then there's a good chance you like a sporty, perky, attractive blonde girl. So just create up a set of fake or imposter accounts with a cute blonde and target the same people, and you've got them hooked pretty quickly. So it often starts with, of course, flattery and an ask using fake and imposter accounts, often of an attractive woman. Sometimes these are actually images of pornography stars. And the reason I mention that is that one of the ways, once they ensnare someone and ask for a sexy chat and the chat continues, one of the ways that they will groom them and try and wear them down to encourage them to, masturbate for the webcam or for a FaceTime or Skype call, is that they will send a pornographic video to kind of say, well, here is me. Well, it's actually an adult actress. I've seen a timeline where a young person connects with a fake account at 8 o'clock. By 9, he's already performed sexual acts for the camera. By 10, not only is he being aggressively targeted and threatened with blackmail and using his followers list to send the intimate imagery to his parents and all his friends and family, but by the time it reaches midnight, he's taken his own life. So this is over a 4-hour period from being contacted by a fake account to taking your own life. This shows how terribly this can go wrong. So once the perp has hooked the victim, someone who's open to chatting with them, then they, keep the pressure up to share explicit sexual videos or photos. This is another reason we encourage parents, even when you're talking about teenagers, to have kids using technology in open areas of the home. We come across a lot of videos of self-produced, coerced child sexual abuse material. It's almost always in the sanctity of the home, in bathrooms and bedrooms. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. Most of the platforms that are being targeted are Snapchat and Instagram. And often they'll move them off platform, either to a Skype or WhatsApp video or FaceTime. And they'll use a combination of charm and flirtatiousness and sexually explicit language to manipulate that. Once they get the imagery, the chat immediately turns menacing, and threats to share the victim's photos with family or friends that the victim doesn't pay. As I mentioned, they can also often look at, say, Instagram has, you can see out in the open the followers. So they can be very forensic and say, I know your father is this person, and this person looks like your girlfriend, and we will be sending this. So it's just really using all of these tactics to corner the person, to make them feel desperate. I mean, we've seen some scripts where they would start by asking for $15,000, and the young person will say, well, I'm only 15, I don't have that much money. And they'll negotiate with them. Well, how much can you pay? How much do you have in your bank account right now? And they'll start there. And once someone pays, they know that they'll feel desperate enough, they'll go back and keep paying. So I would just say, if you come across this and the person is underage, you should report directly to the Australian Centre to Counter Child Sexual Exploitation. If your imagery has been posted online, and they will follow through, that's when they can come to the eSafety Commissioner under our image-based abuse scheme at esafety.gov.au. But this is a good chance to say, these are the golden rules. First and foremost, don't ever pay. And if you're a parent and your child has paid something already, don't pay more. Cease all contact with the blackmailer. Take the evidence that you can, but block them. As I said, if they're under 18, go to the Australian Centre for Child Sexual Exploitation, because it is active child sexual abuse. If they're over 18, screenshot the evidence, including the blackmailer's social media usernames and bank account details and any URLs. Then report in-app and block. So report to the platform.
I know this is kind of an in-the-weeds conversation. I know that it's sort of a little bit even political, but it's such an important conversation. I have one last question, a little bit left field, slightly off where we've been, but still very much in your zone. Last year, Julie, as the eSafety Commissioner, you made a recommendation to the Albanese federal government to trial an age-gated system to stop our kids accessing pornographic content online. The Albanese government shut that recommendation down. They refused to go ahead with that. What's your reaction to that decision?
Well, I mean, we did 2 years of deep consultation and understanding the technologies, the environment. This is often what happens. We put 6 recommendations to government. They didn't outright eject, but really what the minister said was, I want you to focus on phase 2 of the industry codes, which we have already started to do. And in fact, tomorrow on the 22nd of February, we have a big set of conversations about that process. But the codes process around illegal content took more than 2 years. So this is going to be, there are a lot of lessons learned that we're going to try and avoid, but this is something that I think we need to move forward on. The minister has now tasked the department to look at scoping a trial And I can see these two things very much working in parallel as we seek to get commitments from industry up and down the stack. So what is the role of app stores? What is the role of device manufacturers? What is the role of social media sites? Every single sector of the industry will serve as a safety choke point and be able to do something to keep children safe from pornography in a way that's privacy protected and doesn't undermine, the right of adults to access adult content. So, we still have some work to do, and things are moving apace, but so goes government.
I think that's the understatement of the year. We still have some work to do. It's such a challenging area. So grateful for the work that you do, Julie, and the way that you so unselfishly and so persistently take it to people who do not want to have it taken to them and fight for the protection of our children. If I was to summarize the practical side of what you've just said for parents who are listening to this and saying, I don't even know what to do anymore, this is terrifying. What I've heard you say is, number one, make sure that kids are using their screens out in the open, don't have them in bedrooms and bathrooms. Number two, make sure that the kids know that they can talk to you about anything that's happening online and ask them about their online lives and that of their friends. Number three, if your children are approached inappropriately, and for some reason they don't just say no and block the person, if they do get caught up in something, don't pay, get screenshots, collect evidence, block, report, go to the authorities, the police, ACE, and you at the eSafety Commissioner if there's any image-based abuse that's occurred. I think that's about all. What have I missed?
Yep. I think the homework for parents today is go to esafety.gov.au. We've got parents' guides. We've got an eSafety guide that walks you through all of the games, apps, and social media sites your kids might be using. But we've got a page on sexual extortion that lays these out in detail. It also gives you scripts about how you can talk to your children about these issues and let them know they can come to you if anything goes wrong, that they're not going to be in trouble. I think this is what we see with more stigmatized issues, is that kids are afraid of getting in trouble or for what they've done, or device denial. And I think we have to let them know that our preeminent concern as parents is their overall safety and well-being, no matter what has transpired online.
Julie Inman Grant is Australia's eSafety Commissioner. Julie, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
We will link to the eSafety Commissioner website in our show notes. Of course, you can just Google and find everything that you need. Those resources are valuable. Please look at them. As parents, we've got to be across this stuff. It matters so much for our children's well-being. Really appreciate you listening to this very, very important conversation today with Julie Inman Grant, the Australian eSafety Commissioner. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. For more information about keeping your kids safe, check out the eSafety website, also the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, or ace.gov.au. And of course, for more about making your family happier, happyfamilies.com.au.